with me here on stage is Kirk, Senior Vice President of Corporate Development at ServiceNow, oversees technological partnerships, investing, venture investing, and acquisitions. Prior to joining ServiceNow at 2020, Philip spent more than a decade at Cisco in similar positions. Thank you for joining us today, Philip. Maybe we'll start by sharing a bit about the history of ServiceNow and how did you guys took kind of a platform approach early on?
Yeah, sure. Excellent. Happy to be here, and thanks for the question. So ServiceNow is an interesting company. You know, the founding vision that Fred Luddy had when he started the company back in 2004 was to build a platform to route tasks through the enterprise. And his aspiration even early on was to publish that out there as a platform and make it very driven by the customer, what customers wanted to use. Since then, we found great resonance in, obviously, IT, which people think about ServiceNow as a market leader in ticketing and service management. But also, since then, we've expanded into a lot of other areas as well.
Cool. So it's a good segue to talk about the areas that you are currently focused on in terms of the technological partnership, the investing, the acquisition. Are those different between those topics today? What are the sectors that you guys are looking for a solution in?
Sure. So, you know, it's a pretty broad business. So we're definitely looking at adjacencies and investment and development around a lot of different areas. So there's four main areas that we think about. The technology platform, enterprise IT. We think about customer operations and kind of serving the needs of customers. And then we think a lot about employee and the employee experience, because for a lot of companies, the experience of a lot of employees is still really fragmented across so many different SaaS systems. And then the last thing that we care about is the ability to take our platform and rapidly build new applications. And so we have a low-code, no-code platform to help build and innovate. And so if you think about those four areas, there's really critical trends from a market standpoint that we're always looking to partner or invest around in each of those four, right? So if you think about technology platform, we really care about DevOps, rise the developer, and in particular how you're maintaining developer productivity in enterprise environments. For sales and customer experience, you know, we're thinking a lot about data. How do you weave data about a user or an end customer into the way that you service a customer? In our employee arena, it's been fascinating to see how enterprises have changed the way that they manage employees in the last 2-3 years. It's been a huge shift. Small companies have been doing it for a while, but a lot of big companies have gone to remote work, flexible work. And so how do you make sure that you are using all of these employee systems to actually give you insight about talent and enable productivity? And then, you know, low-code, no-code platform, the idea that you can just put together an application around any workflow that you need has been something that we've continued to see a lot of excitement and interest in. So those are a couple areas that we think about, if that's helpful.
No, it's super helpful. On the employee side, by the way, I think one question that jumps to mind is, like, we've seen a shift in the market from being much more efficiency-oriented rather than growth-oriented in terms of companies. I'm sure it has effect also on the way that they manage employees. Do you see that kind of implemented into the SaaS tools and into the kind of the infrastructure of the SaaS with companies, or is that yet to be implementing those SaaS solutions?
Yeah, I think, you know, we definitely, I think employee management historically, lots of times was something that many employers, many companies talked about, but people didn't really want to spend a lot of money on. It was a challenge to really get people to open up their wallets. But now that there's this idea that people really have the ability to chart their own path with their careers, we see a lot of companies saying, okay, yeah, maybe to your point, there's opportunities to increase efficiency. So I can see if I can find, you know, teams that aren't as utilized or aren't as efficiently kind of doing their tasks, and we have visibility into that. But then the second thing is, how do you redeploy those people to make them even more effective? And so, one of the things we're believers in is building like career pathing for customers by helping them see with our employee workflow tools, hey, here's an individual that seems to have a certain set of skills, seems to be working in a certain area. Maybe you should career path them into a different part of your organization. And so you're actually increasing retention of your employees, but you're also maybe redeploying folks in a way that is more productive for the company, but also more engaging for them.
Interesting. So we spoke about the areas you're interested in, and we are here in Israel. So maybe a quick question is, do you see Israel as a specifically interesting geo for those specific sectors? You haven't been that active in acquisition or investing in Israel up until today. Do you see that changing?
Yeah, sure. So, part of the reason that I'm here and I'm excited to be a part of this event is because I'm a big believer in the uniqueness of the Israeli technology ecosystem, which everybody here is a part of, and it's always impressive to me whenever I'm here that you get off the plane, you go to meetings, and everybody is half a degree connected with everybody else, and I see a lot of familiar faces out here today, so it's fun to have that connection and to see that built up. I think for ServiceNow, every global enterprise company needs to have a strong presence in Israel, full stop, right? Whether that's as a development center, we've got over 200 employees here, whether that is kind of as an investor, we've got a pretty active corporate venture practice, and we're looking to invest more in companies that have presence here in Israel. We've got a couple companies that do already, or whether that's as an acquirer, right? We've actually done four acquisitions to date in Israel, and it's a big piece of how we've grown our presence, and I think there's going to be more of that potentially in the future. I think the things that ServiceNow cares about in the enterprise are very often things that we see a lot of Israeli entrepreneurs building a lot of innovation around.
Interesting. So on that acquisition note, I think we've heard from Ryan that those couple of quarters of down market, we haven't seen that many activity in acquisitions, not necessarily because of appetite from buyers, and we have a potential buyer. Is this the case? Like, are you guys have an appetite for acquisition which is increasing? Do you see the conditions in the market that increases that appetite in maybe the next few quarters ahead as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. And Ryan went through, I think he set a speed record for slides and charts there. But Ryan's great. He's super smart, and he looks at all of the data. I do think that it's going to be an interesting time period in the next 6 months, because from our perspective, what we've seen is kind of a few different stages in tech over the last 9 months or so. So kind of the first half of the year, I think a lot of people in technology felt the market correction more dramatically than the broader economic climate. And then in the last quarter or two, and I think in that first period, the question was, is this just kind of a dip that we're going to recover from very quickly? And then now in the last quarter or so, what we've seen is a lot of boards are saying, gosh, especially for public companies, we're executing really well, but shareholders seem to have really fundamentally shifted the way that they view value and how they price businesses. And so we see things kind of changing there in public markets. And then I think in early stage, as it relates to M&A, we're seeing a lot of potential deals. I'm getting emails. We're getting emails that are pretty direct from founders and CEOs, which I think is actually always the right way to approach it. If you've made that decision, if you looked at your cash balance and you're like, gosh, we got 6 months or less cash left. We don't know if we want to do something exotic and structured to kind of give ourselves more runway. We want to explore maybe whether our business should be a part of another company. I've gotten like pretty direct emails from CEOs saying, hey, this is what we're thinking about. We're just trying to be clear with you. And I think that's a good way to handle it. And so I think there is going to be more M&A activity in the next kind of 6 months or so, as both public markets continue to kind of value companies in a different lens, and then private companies frankly, think about what the fundraising environment's going to look like, and then they have to make that trade-off of would it be better to be part of a bigger company, or do they want to still kind of go it alone?
Nice. So let's talk a bit about the future of SaaS. I think you are in a unique position in the organization infrastructure to have an interesting visibility to its SaaS strategy. Where do you think we are in terms of the SaaS, like the maturity curve for SaaS solutions? I know McKee, for example, spoke earlier today about product-led growth and that being a very appealing go-to-market, both because of the kind of efficiency that it holds. And I think that we've seen small and medium organizations that are they are getting to used to buying that way. Is it the same for large organizations? You think they will ever get there?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, and product-led growth is an amazing kind of lens to think about innovation and growth around. I think it's actually really hard to do very well. I think a lot of people sometimes look at product-led growth and they say, okay, well, if I'm going to invest, it's super tough to just dump a lot of money into sales and marketing and build an outbound sales organization, especially for enterprise software. And so maybe I'll just put that money into products and R&D, and the product will, figure out its sort of viral expansion motion in the enterprise, and then the magic will happen and the checks will come in. What that requires in terms of the interface between engineering and product is actually very, very specific. And I think it's very hard to get right. I think it's very hard to get right. You've got to have the right kind of product organization, product leaders, and you've got to have the right market opportunity where it kind of makes sense. I think it's a great way sometimes to get team level wins in a customer, or maybe to get kind of departmental wins. But I also think it's tough to get customer purchases above a certain threshold purely in a PLG motion. And there's companies that have done it, so it's certainly possible. But when you build your financial model and your unit-based economics of a business, and you kind of think about coming up from the bottom, and then you think about where you want to get long-term, usually there's this gap in the middle, and people say, okay, maybe we've got to turn on enterprise selling at some stage, or maybe we need to kind of rethink that. To tie it back to the question, I think, about the economic climate, one thing that we see a lot of is we actually still see growth in large customers. So the cohort of customers that spends more than 10 million in ACV with us grew this last quarter by over 60%. So we're still seeing, and that's at the really high end, those customers grow substantially. The other thing, though, that we've been seeing with the economic climate is we've had large customers, these are large enterprise customers, show us how they're actually really reducing or rationalizing vendors. So there was one large Fortune 500 customer that I was involved with the customer sale in the last quarter. They actually showed us a list. And they said, here's all the vendors that we're spending time with right now, spending dollars with right now in enterprise. And it was like all these 25, we're cutting them down to 4. And so I do think that with the economic climate, it's going to be a little tough for some companies, because you're going to have to figure out if those products are a must-have or a nice-to-have, and then how they're going to manage to maintain their position in the enterprise.
I can't help asking, how do you see security in that angle, either on the kind of SaaS security? Is this something that oppose like a blocker to adoption, more tools in that aspect, especially for the large enterprises, compliance, things like that, that PLG kind of go-to-market makes it maybe a bit more challenging to overcome?
Yeah, security is always, security is, I think, always a priority in every customer that we talk to, in every CIO survey that I'm sure folks in this room read. What are your top 5 areas of spend? Security is always in the top 3, probably. I do think with SaaS, it's a unique challenge, because whether it is data-related policies around things like GDPR, or whether it is just user complexity because there's so many different SaaS tools. The security and use cases are very hard to manage and very hard to manage through. I mean, we've invested in companies like App Omni, which are doing basically consistency across your different SaaS tools and platforms. And there's a lot of other companies trying to tackle this space. So I do think that security for SaaS is going to continue to be an area where there's a lot of promise.
Nice. I saw that we have only 2 minutes. So last question. I'm sure you've heard about the life cycle of bundling and unbundling in kind of solutions for enterprises. It became almost kind of a cliche of how startup makes money. They bundle solutions, then they unbundle solutions. I think if we'll take productivity tools as an example, we've seen a lot of unbundling happened with a lot of end-to-end kind of silo solutions. First of all, do you agree? And do you think we're about to see the phase of bundling those solutions again and kind of consolidating a lot of them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's interesting because on the one hand, SaaS feels like a pretty mature market. On the other hand, SaaS as a percent of total IT spend is still pretty small. So there's a ton of new areas where I think there's opportunity to build more products and build more innovation and deliver it in a SaaS model. I do think that the knowledge worker related environment, all the tools for the average knowledge worker at a company, you look at how many different productivity tools are out there now and how many startups have gone after that user persona. There's a ton, right? And all of them are kind of serving slightly different needs, trying to find their little niche in the market. I do think ultimately, though, it's just like, at least, in the US, we've had this whole dynamic with the bundling and unbundling of cable television and streaming services. There's like a very clear parallel, I think, between that, where one day you wake up and you look at your credit card bill and you're saying, how many things am I paying for? And what the enterprise probably experiences oftentimes with productivity tools for knowledge workers. So I do think there's going to be a rebundling there. And what you're going to start to see is, companies will align or group around certain use cases. Some people may end up being partners with each other to sort of deliver a full solution. Other companies are just going to, I think, kind of eclipse one another, and you're going to see some winners and losers shake out there too.
Thank you very much, Phil, for an insightful discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.